I never thought a simple curiosity would lead me to being locked in a room with a guy that first barely knew, but here I was, door shut tight behind me, and his smirk still lingering in the air. Honestly, if someone had told me earlier that a casual chat over coffee would end like this, I'd have laughed it off. But that's exactly what happened. So let me back up a bit, because this whole thing spiraled faster than I expected. I've always been pretty chill about dating, mostly because I'm a bit awkward and picky. Not to mention, I've never been the type to jump into anything without thinking it through. But last month, I met this guy, Ethan, at a friend's birthday party. He was this quiet, confident kind of guy. Dark hair, sharp eyes, and this way of making you feel like he was actually listening, not just waiting for his turn to talk. We ended up chatting for hours about everything from music to weird childhood memories, and soon enough I found myself wanting to know more. I didn't think it was anything serious. Just a connection, nothing complicated. We exchanged numbers, started texting, and after a week, he invited me over to his place. His message was casual. Curious to see what you're like outside of your usual scene. He wrote. That was it. Simple. I thought, sure, why not? I was curious too. When I arrived, his apartment was all sleek and minimal, with that modern vibe that somehow manages to feel both cold and cozy at the same time. Ethan greeted me with that same easy smile and offered me a drink. We settled into the couch, and the conversation picked up where it left off. But then, out of nowhere, he said, "Wanna see something?" with a mischievous glint in his eyes. I should have known then that curiosity wasn't just about me checking out his vinyl collection or his taste in movies. Before I could even respond, he stood up and locked the door behind him. Now, I was standing there, realizing that this wasn't just a casual hangout anymore. Whatever game Ethan was playing, it was about to get real. And honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready for it. I stood there for a moment, the sound of the lock clicking into place echoing louder than I expected in the quiet apartment. My heart kicked up a notch. Not exactly out of fear, but because suddenly everything felt a little charged, like the air between us had shifted. Ethan didn't say anything right away, just turned to face me with that same smirk, like he was daring me to ask what was going on. I swallowed hard and forced a laugh. Okay, so what was the something you wanted to show me? He took a step closer, his gaze intense but warm. Just wanted to see how curious you really are, he said, voice low, almost teasing. It's easy to talk about things, but seeing how someone reacts when the situation changes, that's a whole different story. I wasn't sure how to respond to that. There was a weird thrill in the way he said it, like he was testing me or trying to push some invisible boundary. Part of me wanted to back out, to turn around and run out of there while the door was still locked, though I'm pretty sure he'd have stopped me if I tried. But another part, the part that had been craving something different for a while, nudged me forward. Okay, I said, trying to sound casual, though my voice probably betrayed me. So what now? He smiled wider, the kind of smile that made you forget to breathe for a second. Now, you get to pick something you're curious about. I blinked. Me? Like what? Anything. Something you want to know about me. Or yourself if you want to get really deep. He tilted his head, waiting. I wasn't used to this kind of honesty. Or this kind of challenge. Usually guys just flirt and then disappear after a few texts. But Ethan was different. He was inviting me into this little game, and I wasn't sure whether it was safe or reckless. But I was leaning toward reckless. All right, I said after a pause. What's the weirdest thing you've ever done? He laughed, a deep sound that filled the room. That's a good one. Honestly, I once drove halfway across the state just because a friend dared me to. No real reason, just because it felt like an adventure. I grinned. That's pretty impulsive. Yeah, well, I'm not always so calculated. He looked at me like he was deciding something. Your turn. What's something you've never told anyone? I hesitated. That felt more personal than I was ready for. But looking at him, locked in this unexpected moment, I found myself wanting to share something real, not just surface stuff, I guess. I've never told anyone how much I've wanted to fall for someone who actually sees me. Like, really sees me, I said quietly. The room suddenly felt smaller, warmer, Ethan stepped closer again, and I couldn't tell anymore if the tension was from the closeness or the words between us. "I get that," he said softly. "And maybe that's why you're here now." Before I could respond, his hand brushed against mine, light and deliberate. It wasn't rushed or desperate, just steady, like a promise. I looked down at our fingers, almost touching, then back up at his face, which was suddenly vulnerable. "I locked the door because I wanted to create a space where we could be honest," he said. "No distractions, no pretending, just us, figuring out what this could be." I didn't know what to say. Part of me was still skeptical. Locking a door isn't exactly the most normal way to start something, but the other part was telling me to trust the moment. "Curiosity," I repeated, "can be dangerous." He smiled, a little crooked and real. "Yeah, but sometimes it's worth the risk." We stayed like that for a while, hands almost touching, both of us caught between saying more and just being present. Outside, the city hummed quietly, but in that room, time slowed down. Then Ethan surprised me again. He leaned in closer, eyes searching mine, and whispered, "Want to find out what else you're curious about?" I nodded, heart pounding, because in that moment I was ready to see where this locked door could lead. When Ethan asked if I wanted to find out what else I was curious about, it felt like the whole room shifted. It wasn't just about some cheeky game anymore. It was like he was opening a door, one I hadn't even realized was there, leading to something I'd been holding back on for way too long. I swallowed, trying to steady my racing heart. "Yeah," I said, voice rougher than I meant. "I'm curious." He smiled softly, and for a second I thought he was going to kiss me. But instead, he reached out and took my hand fully in his, weaving our fingers together. It was casual, but the way he held me felt anything but. Like he was grounding me, reminding me I wasn't alone in this room, in this moment. So Ethan said, "What's something you've wanted to try but never told anyone?" No judgment. I blinked, surprised by the question. It wasn't like a normal date where you just stick to the usual small talk. This was deeper, more honest. I thought about it. About the nights I'd spent scrolling through dating apps, swiping past profiles, feeling more alone the more I searched for something real. There's this thing I've always wondered about. I started hesitating, but I was too scared to admit it, even to myself. I guess I've never really been with a guy, and I've wondered what it'd be like to slow it down, really connect. Not just sleep togethers or texting, but something that feels like it matters. Ethan's grip on my hand tightened just a bit. I get that. I've been there too. It's scary to let someone see you like that. I nodded, feeling a weird mix of relief and anticipation. It was like I'd been carrying this secret alone. And now, here was someone who not only understood but wanted to share it with me. "All right," he said, sliding off the couch. "How about we start with that? No expectations. Just a moment. A connection." I followed him, heart pounding in that thrilling way when you don't know what's coming next, but you want it anyway. He led me to a part of the apartment I hadn't seen yet, a small room with plenty of natural light and a couple of chairs facing each other. It was simple but inviting, like a little sanctuary. Ethan sat down first, patting the chair opposite him. "Your turn," he said, smiling gently. "Tell me something about you that I wouldn't guess." I thought about it, about all the layers I usually kept hidden. "I'm terrible at small talk," I admitted with a laugh. "Like, I'd rather talk about my fears or dreams than the weather." He chuckled. "Sounds like we'd get along just fine." For a moment, the silence between us wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, like we were both just breathing in the same space, taking stock of what was happening. Then Ethan broke the quiet. "Can I ask you something a little personal?" "Shoot," I said, bracing myself. "When was the last time you felt truly seen?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. "Honestly, I don't think I've felt that way in a long time," I said quietly. "Maybe never, really." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than I was saying. "That's why I locked the door," he said. "To shut out the noise, the distractions. So maybe we can find that here, even if it's just for a little while." The vulnerability in his voice made my chest ache in a way I wasn't prepared for. It was raw and real, nothing like the casual banter I was used to. I stood up and took a step closer. I don't want this to be just a moment, I said. I want to see where this goes. Ethan's eyes flickered with a mix of surprise and something like hope. Me too. That's when he reached out and pulled me gently toward him, closing the distance between us. His lips brushed against mine, tentative but sure, like he was testing the waters but ready to dive in if I was. I kissed him back, slow and soft at first, then a little deeper as the seconds stretched on. It wasn't perfect or polished. It was messy and real and exactly what I needed. When we finally pulled apart, breathless, Ethan whispered, "See? Sometimes curiosity leads to better things than you expect." I laughed, still feeling the warmth of his touch. "Yeah, locked doors and all." He smiled, that same crooked grin that made my heart twist in the best way. Guess we're both a little curious after all. And in that moment, with the door locked and the city humming outside, I realized I didn't want to be anywhere else. We stayed like that for a moment, just holding each other close, the kind of quiet that fills up a room better than any conversation could. Outside, the city lights flickered through the windows, but in Ethan's apartment, it felt like time had slowed way down. I was still trying to process what just happened, how a guy the first barely knew had gone from casual acquaintance to someone who'd kissed me like it meant something real. Eventually, he broke the silence, his breath warm against my ear. "I should probably tell you something," Ethan said, pulling back just enough to look at me. My heart skipped. "Okay, I'm listening." He cleared his throat, and for a second, I thought maybe he was nervous. That locking the door thing? Yeah, it was kind of impulsive, but it wasn't just about curiosity. I wanted to make sure you felt comfortable. Sometimes, when I'm with someone new, I worry they might back out at the first sign of unpredictability. So locking the door was my way of saying, "Hey, I want to see if you're willing to stick around." I blinked, processing that. It was kind of sweet in a weird, slightly controlling way. But honestly, I couldn't be mad. He was being honest, and that's rare. I shrugged. "Well, I stayed. So I guess I passed your test?" He laughed, that easy, genuine laugh that made my chest warm. "Yeah, you did." We ended up sitting on the couch again, this time closer, feet almost touching. The conversation turned softer, less about games and more about the real stuff. Past relationships, fears about being vulnerable, what love even meant when you'd been burned before. At one point, I found myself telling him about how I'd been out for a while but rarely let anyone get close. I always thought someone like me wouldn't be enough for the kind of love I wanted. I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Ethan reached out and tucked a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "That's bullshit," he said firmly. "You're more than enough. You just haven't found the right person yet." His words hit me harder than I expected. Maybe it was the way he said it, or maybe because I wanted to believe it so badly. I don't know if I'm ready for all of this. Whatever this is, I confessed, but I want to try. He nodded, eyes soft but determined. "Me too. No pressure, no rush. Just see where it goes." We talked until late, the kind of deep, honest talk that usually takes months to build up to. And when it was finally time for me to leave, Ethan walked me to the door, unlocked it without a word, and held it open. Outside, the city was still buzzing, but inside me, something had settled. I looked at him one last time and smiled, a genuine hopeful smile. "Thanks for the adventure," I said. He grinned back. "Anytime, and hey, next time, maybe you lock the door." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in ages as I walked down the hallway, already wondering when I'd see him again. After that night, things didn't magically become some perfect romance movie. Honestly, I was half expecting the next day to come with a text from Ethan saying, "Sorry, that was weird, let's just pretend it didn't happen." But that message never came. Instead, he sent something simple. "Coffee tomorrow? I want to hear more about your weird music tastes." It was casual but inviting, and I found myself smiling at my phone like a total goof. We met up at this little cafe, not far from my place, the kind with mismatched chairs, and that faint smell of old books mingling with espresso. Ethan was already there when I arrived, tucked into a corner with a cup of black coffee and that same easy smirk. He looked up, waved, and motioned me over. Sitting across from him, I could feel the familiar nervous buzz, but it wasn't the awkwardness of a first date. It felt more like two people who had already started a conversation they didn't want to end. So, he started, "I'm still curious. What's the story behind that band you mentioned last night? The one with the ridiculous name." I laughed, grateful for something light. "Oh, that. They're this obscure indie group from back home. My sister forced me to listen to them when I was 16. And I swear, their lyrics saved me from a lot of teenage nonsense." He raised an eyebrow. "You mean like a musical lifeline?" "Exactly. Plus their lead singer looks like he might hate everyone but also secretly wants to be friends with you." Ethan grinned. "Sounds relatable. We spent the next hour trading stories, not just about music, but life, family, little embarrassing moments. The kind of stuff you don't usually reveal on dates, but with him, it felt safe." At one point, he leaned forward and said, "You know, locking me in your place might be a good way to make sure I don't leave." I rolled my eyes but smiled. "I'm not that controlling." "Are you sure? Because I'm starting to think you're a little mysterious." "Mysterious?" I teased. "I'm about as straightforward as they come." He shrugged, eyes twinkling. "We'll see." After coffee, we wandered around the neighborhood, the city's evening lights flickering on, casting a golden glow over everything. We stopped at a park bench, and Ethan pulled his jacket tighter around him. "You know," he said, "I've been thinking about that night. About locking the door." I looked at him, curious. "Sometimes," he continued, "you have to close off the world a little to open up to the right person." I wasn't trying to trap you. It was more like creating space. Space where we could be ourselves without worrying about what's outside. I nodded slowly, surprised at how well he put it into words. "That makes sense," I said. He smiled, the kind that makes you think he's hiding a secret, but also wants to share it with you someday. We sat there for a while, the silence between us comfortable, filled with something neither of us seemed willing to name just yet. In the weeks that followed, our connection grew in ways I hadn't expected. We met for dinners, shared late-night walks, exchanged texts that stretched into early mornings. Ethan was patient, never rushing, always listening. And I found myself opening up more than I ever thought I would. One night, a couple of weeks after our first locked door moment, he invited me over again. This time, the door was unlocked when I arrived, but the electricity in the air was just as strong. We cooked dinner together, laughing over my terrible chopping skills and his overly ambitious recipe choices. Afterward, we collapsed on the couch, a pile of dishes forgotten on the counter. "I'm glad you stayed," Ethan said quietly, tracing lazy circles on my hand. "Me too," I admitted. "I never imagined this would turn into something like this." He looked at me, eyes soft. "Neither did I. But sometimes curiosity leads you to the best surprises." In that moment, with the city lights painting patterns on the walls and Ethan's hand in mine, I realized I was ready to see where this unexpected path would take us, locked doors, open hearts, and all. A few nights after that dinner, something shifted between us. Not in a flashy movie scene kind of way, but in those quiet moments that sneak up when you least expect it. We were sprawled out on his couch, half watching some old black and white film neither of us had seen before. Ethan's head was resting lightly against my shoulder, and I was just marveling at how comfortable it felt, like I'd found a space where I could breathe without holding anything back. Out of nowhere, Ethan sat up, stretching with a yawn. "You know," he said, "we've been doing a lot of talking about feelings and curiosities, but I haven't asked you something important." I raised an eyebrow, amused by how serious he suddenly sounded. "What's that?" He looked at me, eyes searching like he was trying to find the right words in the dark. "What scares you the most about all this? About us?" I blinked, caught off guard. It felt like he'd just opened a door to a room I wasn't entirely ready to enter. But he was waiting, patient, and I owed him honesty. Honestly, being vulnerable, I admitted, letting someone in without knowing if they'll stay, or if they'll walk away the moment things get real. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." It's scary to risk getting hurt. I looked at him, feeling the weight of his gaze. But here's the thing. After that night, when you locked the door, I realized maybe the risk is worth it. Because what if this, whatever we're building, is something I don't want to lose? He smiled, that same crooked grin that made my stomach flutter. I'm glad you stayed curious. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of everyday moments that started to feel extraordinary. We cooked breakfast in pajamas, argued playfully over who made the better playlist, and found comfort in silence when words felt too much. It wasn't always easy. There were nights when my insecurities crept in or when life's chaos tested us, but Ethan was steady, like a lighthouse in a storm. One evening, after a long day that left me drained, Ethan surprised me by showing up at my apartment with a pizza and a silly movie. We ate on the floor, laughing at terrible jokes and making fun of the cheesy plot. When the movie ended, he reached for my hand, his thumb tracing lazy circles over my knuckles. "Hey," he whispered, voice low and earnest. "I've been thinking maybe it's time we stop hiding behind curiosity and start naming what this is." I looked at him, heart pounding. "You mean, like, a relationship?" He nodded. "Yeah, because I want this to be more than just a series of moments. I want to build something real with you." I swallowed, emotions swirling. It was terrifying and exciting all at once. I want that too. And just like that, the unspoken became spoken. And the space between us shifted again. It wasn't about locked doors or tests anymore. It was about two people choosing each other day after day. That night, as we lay side by side, I thought back to that first moment when Ethan locked the door. What started as a curious experiment had blossomed into something I never expected, but had always wanted. A chance to be seen, to be loved, without pretense or fear. I squeezed his hand gently and whispered, "Thanks for locking the door." It's the best thing that ever happened to me. Days turned into weeks, and every moment with Ethan layered itself into this growing feeling I could only describe as belonging. It wasn't flashy or dramatic, just two guys carving out a space in the chaos of life where they could be themselves without masks or walls. But even with all that warmth, I found myself wrestling with this quiet nervousness, like I was standing at the edge of something huge and trying not to fall. One Saturday afternoon, Ethan invited me over to his place for what he called a, quote, project day. When I got there, he had laid out a bunch of old photo albums and a stack of postcards on his coffee table. I raised an eyebrow. "What's all this?" He grinned, that mischievous spark lighting his eyes. "I thought we could do some digging into our pasts. You know, share stories about where we come from. It's like building a bridge between then and now." I settled onto the couch, feeling a bit nervous, but mostly curious. I hadn't really shared much about my family or background with him yet, mostly because, well, it felt complicated. But Ethan's openness made me feel safe enough to try. He opened one of the albums, revealing black and white photos of him as a kid, his family, places that looked foreign and familiar at the same time. I listened as he talked about his childhood, the summers at his grandparents' lake house, the messy divorce his parents went through when he was a teenager. When it was my turn, I hesitated before pulling out a faded photo from my wallet, a picture of me and my younger brother back when we were kids, grinning with messy hair and scraped knees. "My family isn't perfect," I started, voice catching a little. "We had our share of fights, and I guess I always felt like the odd one out. I wasn't the athlete or the popular kid. I was the quiet one who kept to himself." Ethan reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "That's okay. I'm glad you shared it." We spent the afternoon swapping stories, some funny, some painfully honest, and somewhere in those moments, the weight I'd been carrying started to lift. Because here was someone who didn't judge my past or expect me to fix it on the spot. He just wanted to know me. Later, as the sun dipped low and painted the room in golden light, Ethan suggested we take a walk. We ended up wandering through a nearby park, leaves crunching underfoot and the air turning crisp. Out of nowhere, he stopped and faced me. "Can I ask you something?" he said, eyes serious. "Always." I replied, heart already speeding up. Why did it take so long for you to let someone in? To be vulnerable with someone? I thought about it, about all the walls I'd built, the fear of getting hurt, and the times I'd push people away before they could leave me first. I guess I was protecting myself, I said softly. But with you, it feels different. Like I don't have to be on guard all the time. He nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. That means a lot. We stood there for a moment, the world around us quiet except for the distant sounds of traffic and birds settling in for the evening. Then Ethan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering on my cheek. I want you to know something, he said, voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to be perfect for me. You're enough. All of you. I felt something catch in my throat. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them, like he meant every single syllable. I'm scared sometimes, I admitted, but I want to keep trying. With you. He smiled, that soft, genuine smile that made all the doubts shrink away a little. Me too. We kept walking, hands intertwined, the city lights starting to twinkle on around us. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't just wandering through life hoping for something better. I was actually building it. Later that night, back at his apartment, we sat curled up on the couch, the silence between us filled with something tender and steady. Ethan looked over and caught my gaze. You know, he said, locking the door was the boldest thing I ever did. And honestly, I don't regret it for a second. I laughed softly. Me neither. He squeezed my hand, all warmth and promise. We're in this together now. And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. The door was still locked, but the space between us was wide open. A few weeks after that walk in the park, Ethan and I settled into an easy rhythm that felt like the quiet pulse of something real. It wasn't about grand gestures or fireworks. It was the little things. Morning texts that made me smile, his hand slipping into mine when we walked down the street, the way he listened when I talked about my day, even when it was just a string of small annoyances. Those moments added up, stitching us closer together. One evening, we were sitting on his balcony. The city sprawled out below us in a patchwork of lights. Ethan had made that ridiculous playlist he joked about, and it was playing softly through the speakers. I leaned back, letting the cool night air brush against my skin, feeling his presence next to me like a steady anchor. He turned to me and smiled, that familiar crooked smile that still made my heart skip after all this time. You know, he said, locking that door was kind of a gamble. I laughed, nudging him gently. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should be terrified or intrigued. Well, he said, his eyes catching the glow from the city below. I'm glad you stayed. More than I can say. I looked at him, the weight of everything we'd been through settling warmly in my chest. Me too. It's weird how one impulsive thing can lead to something so... right. He reached out, brushing my hair away from my forehead with a tenderness that made me close my eyes for a second. This, he said softly, is probably the closest thing to perfect I've ever had. I opened my eyes and met his gaze. Maybe perfect isn't about everything being flawless. Maybe it's about finding someone who makes the flaws feel like part of the story. Someone you want to keep showing up for. Ethan nodded slowly, squeezing my hand. Yeah, someone who makes you want to lock the door, but also keeps it open at the same time. We laughed together, the sound easy and full of all the promises we hadn't spoken aloud yet. Neither of us knew exactly what the future held. But in that moment, it didn't matter. We had an unhurried, honest connection built on trust and a little bit of curiosity. As the night deepened, I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart. And for once, I wasn't afraid. I was exactly where I was supposed to be.